Summer 2020. The world is in lockdown. Offices are closed, schools are remote, and most people are spending their nights online. The gaming scene at that moment was strange. Fortnite was still massive, Warzone had just launched, and Animal Crossing had dominated the early pandemic months. But there was a fatigue setting in, a fatigue of realism, of stress, of violence. Amid the chaos, a new phenomenon rolled onto the scene, or rather stumbled, tumbled, and face-planted its way into our hearts. Fall Guys, a game that didn't take itself seriously in the slightest. No guns, no leaderboards, no grim tone. Just clumsy, brightly colored jelly beans running through cartoon obstacle courses, getting smacked by giant hammers and push-off spinning platforms. It was chaotic, hilarious, and instantly addictive. At a time when everything else in the world felt heavy, Fall Guys was pure, dumb joy, and it spread like wildfire. The story of Fall Guys actually starts years before its release. Mediatonic, a London-based studio founded in 2005, had a long history of making quirky small-scale games, flash titles, mobile projects, and adaptations of popular shows like Foul Play. But in 2018, one of their designers, Joe Walsh, had an idea that stood out. He pitched a concept called Fool's Gauntlet. The idea was simple: a large-scale online obstacle course inspired by shows like Takeshi's Castle, Total Wipeout, and It's a Knockout. Instead of one-on-one combat, dozens of players would compete through goofy physics-based challenges until only one remained. It was basically a battle royale without the guns. At the time, Fortnite and PUBG were defining the genre. Every studio was chasing that formula: massive maps, realistic weapons, and competitive intensity. Mediatonic decided to go the other way, embracing slapstick fun over combat. When publisher Devolver Digital got involved, the idea finally gained traction. Devolver was known for backing offbeat creative projects, and they immediately saw potential in the chaotic vision of Fall Guys. By 2019, the game entered active development using Unity, and began internal playtesting. One of the earliest challenges was scale. The game engine really handled 60 players, all with physics-based ragdoll movement, colliding, bouncing, and falling in real time. It wasn't easy, but the developers were committed to making it feel like a playable game show, something bright, physical, and universally approachable. The goal wasn't realism, it was laughter. And that design philosophy would become the beating heart of Fall Guys. Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout launched on August 4th, 2020 for PC and PlayStation 4, and almost instantly, it broke. Not because it was bad, but because so many people wanted to play it. Thanks to clever marketing and a brilliant partnership, Fall Guys released as a free PlayStation Plus game at launch. That meant millions of players had instant access, no barrier to entry. The result? Over 1.5 million players in the first 24 hours. The servers couldn't keep up. People were stuck at login screens for hours, constantly booted from matches. But instead of anger, something unusual happened. People laughed it off. The chaos felt on brand. Fall Guys wasn't just a game, it was an event. Streamers like Tim the Tatman, XQC, Pokimane, Dr. Lupo, and Ninja all streamed it in its opening week. Every round was a highlight reel. Players screaming as they were flung into the abyss, cheering as they grabbed the final crown. And behind the scenes, the game's Twitter account, run by community manager Oliver H24, became legendary. It was witty, self-deprecating, and relentlessly funny, joking with fans, roasting other games, and sparking viral moments that kept Fall Guys in the headlines. The brand voice felt human, something few studios managed to pull off. Soon, every major company wanted in. KFC, Wendy's, Xbox, Konami, Cyberpunk all tweeting at the Fall Guys account just to join the fun. Within weeks, Fall Guys had sold over 7 million copies on Steam, became the most downloaded PlayStation Plus title in history, and topped Twitch's charts. It was the definition of an overnight success. But as we all know, no one stays on top forever. When you rise that fast, there's nowhere to go but down, and Fall Guys' first major problem was simple: content. At launch, the game had around 25 minigames, split into races, survival rounds, and team challenges. They were great fun, but the variety ran thin after dozens of matches. Players quickly found favorites, like Slime Climb, Hexagon, and Fall Mountain, and learned to dread others like Team Tail Tag or Seesaw. Once you played for a few days, you'd seen almost everything. The second issue? Cheating. On PC, hackers were using speed and jump hacks to fly across the map, ruining matches for everyone. Mediatonic had built Fall Guys as a feel-good, family-friendly experience, not an esports title, so their anti-cheat systems were weak. And finally, the servers. Even after weeks of patches, connection errors persisted. Still, players remained hopeful. Mediatonic promised seasons, new maps, new costumes, and a battle pass. Season 2, themed around medieval knights and castles, was on the way. But before it could drop, another game stole the spotlight. In September 2020, Among Us exploded across Twitch and YouTube. Its social gameplay, based on deception and teamwork, became the next big cultural event, and for many streamers, it scratched the same itch Fall Guys did. Overnight, the hype around Fall Guys began to fade. Mediatonic worked hard to keep the game alive. They released Season 2, Medieval Knockout, in October 2020, adding new maps like Night Fever and Wall Guys. It helped a little, but the momentum wasn't the same. Each subsequent season introduced clever new ideas. The updates were fun, but they came slowly. Players could easily finish a season's content in a few hours, leaving little reason to come back daily. Meanwhile, Fall Guys competitors evolved rapidly. Fortnite was hosting concerts, Warzone introduced new maps, and Among Us was expanding with new features. The bar for live service games had risen dramatically, and Mediatonic was still a small studio trying to keep up. Still, the developers stayed creative. They introduced limited time events, crossover skins, and even experimental rounds. But the truth was becoming clear. Fall Guys didn't have a progression system deep enough to sustain long-term engagement. It was a fun distraction, not a lifestyle game. Then, in March 2021, everything changed. Epic Games, the billion-dollar company behind Fortnite and Rocket League, announced they had acquired Mediatonic. Fans were both excited and nervous. Epic had the infrastructure and money to supercharge Fall Guys, better servers, better updates, and the potential for massive crossovers. But there were fears too. Would it lose its indie charm? For a while, development went quiet. Then, in June 2022, Fall Guys relaunched under Epic's banner. The game went free-to-play, launched on Xbox, Switch, and the Epic Game Store, added full crossplay, and got a new seasonal reset called Free For All. And just like that, Fall Guys was trending again. Millions of new players joined within days. The game hit its highest player count ever. Streamers returned for nostalgic chaos. Epic had done it. Fall Guys was relevant again. But the honeymoon didn't last. Many returning players noticed that little had changed. The core loop was identical. No major gameplay overhaul, no rank system, and now a heavy emphasis on microtransactions. The once symbolic crowns, the reward for victory, were no longer a currency, replaced by premium show bucks. It felt corporate. Same goofy fun was still there, but something had been lost. That sense of innocence, of scrappy creativity. As 2023 rolled in, Fall Guys' audience began to shrink again. Epic continued releasing themed seasons, and even introduced a level editor so players could make their own rounds. It was a smart move, echoing Fortnite creative. But by that point, most of the mainstream audience had moved on. The game's Twitch viewership plummeted. Player counts steadily declined. Even major collaborations like Star Trek or Disney skins failed to create lasting buzz. Part of the issue was how Fall Guys was built. It didn't lend itself to the same endless replayability that shooters or sandbox games had. Every match, no matter the theme, was still run, dodge, jump, fall. Fun in short bursts, but exhausting in repetition. And though the community that remained was passionate, the world had simply moved on from the era of Fall Guys hype. Looking back, Fall Guys didn't collapse because of one mistake. It faded from the spotlight because of a perfect storm of challenges. First, timing. It launched at the perfect cultural moment, during lockdown when everyone was looking for a shared laugh. That moment was lightning in a bottle. Once people went back to school, work, and real life, the communal energy vanished. Second, design limitations. Fall Guys was never meant to be competitive or skill-based. It was built on randomness, which made it fun, but also frustrating. Winning felt more like luck than mastery, and for long-term players, that lack of depth hurt replayability. Third, content pacing. Even after Epic's acquisition, updates were slow compared to modern live service standards. By the time a new season dropped, many players had already moved on. And finally, identity. The more Fall Guys tried to evolve into a live service juggernaut, the more it lost the charm that made it special. It started as an underdog indie game with heart and ended up feeling like just another corporate product. Yet, despite its fall, the legacy of Fall Guys is undeniable. It proved that multiplayer games don't have to be violent or serious to succeed. It showed that accessibility, laughter, and chaos can connect people just as much as competition. Fall Guys inspired countless imitators, all following its goofy, physics-driven formula. And it gave us moments of genuine joy, the kind of simple, contagious fun that's rare in gaming. For a few unforgettable months, it united millions of people around the world in shared laughter, slipping, sliding, screaming, and celebrating over a golden crown that meant absolutely nothing, and somehow everything. Fall Guys didn't fail, it just fell. And maybe that's fitting. It was always about falling after all. Tripping, stumbling, getting back up, and trying again. It wasn't the biggest game ever made, or the most complex, but it was one of the purest. A celebration of chaos and color in a world that desperately needed both. For that reason, Fall Guys will always be remembered. Not as the game that lasted forever, but as the one that reminded us how fun it is to simply play. Thanks for watching this deep dive. Do you think Fall Guys could ever make a comeback? If you got a favorite Fall Guys memory, drop it in the comments. If you want more video essays like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a good one, everyone.